I think that they got the message that they are very much repudiated by a large majority of the Chilean people, but on the other hand, they need to try to conduct this process in a way that it's sensitive to minorities representation, to gender representation, and they're now, as we speak, starting to work, and they will issue a report and a decision in a couple of weeks.
So, Javier, once we have a decision on how the Constitutional Assembly, let's call it that, will work, you said that it seems from the accord that it requires a 2/3 majority for any decision. So each clause of the new Constitution will require a 2/3 majority of the participants in the constitutional body. What happens if they cannot reach a 2/3 majority on any particular provision or on anything?
The 2/3 majority for having a clause of the new Constitution to be included was very polemical, because some people thought it reminded the 2/3 majority required to change any clause of Pinochet's Constitution. The big difference is that we will start with a blank sheet. So in other words, in some constituent processes, if you cannot have the required majority to change something, the existing constitutional clause remains. Here, the agreement reached last Friday was that if no agreement is reached, there's nothing, which of course creates a problem, because you can imagine a very important issue that's basically not going to be included in the Constitution if there is no agreement. But that was much more, I think people would have been completely against an agreement if the default position would have been Pinochet's Constitution. What is being expected to happen is that there will be an understanding that you cannot submit something that's a constitution with lots of voids. On the other hand, people are saying, well, if something is not in the Constitution, that does not preclude the future Congress to start filling those gaps. So there's a lot of uncertainty of how this will actually work. The bet that some people who are against the new Constitution using this to say this is going to be a disaster, a mess, and therefore we shall vote no in April, because this is very badly thought. So I think that there's a lot to be debated, and people are looking to other experiences, how other experiences have been dealt with this issue. A supermajority to have something included, but with a blank sheet if no agreement is reached on a particular clause. I accept ideas to be quite honest, because
has there been any conversation about a set of constitutional principles that would be set up as a preliminary agreement? Because that's the kind of way in which many of these processes around the globe have moved forward, is that there's a very broad set of constitutional principles agreed to beforehand. Now we lost him. Back.
Okay, now I'm back. As I was saying, there's been some conversations that the Inter-American Human Rights Convention should be kind of the default for the whole constituent process of Chile. But this has been so fast that we're in the very early conversations. In other words, the Inter-American Human Rights Convention seems to be a common ground that everybody seems to be ready to live with. So in other words, that would be equivalent to the principles we were talking about, Hans.
Right.
But still too early in the proceeding to know.
And of course, the trouble with adopting something like the Inter-American Convention is that implies justiciability. and you're right back with the problem of giving a court power to make those decisions. And so then the issue is going to become appointment of the court.
That's true, but I think that even the right-wing parties are very conscious that it's impossible to have a constitutional court that's set the way it was set, and it's so powerful. One of the most controversial aspects of the Chilean Constitutional Court is basically the a priori powers, the powers to strike down a law bill that's about to become a law, but it's not yet a law. Basically, the notion that you have a third chamber, a non-elected third chamber of Congress that strikes down something that has been very slowly and laboriously put together as a law bill, and it's struck down just by a very one vote majority in the Constitutional Court. That's something that there's a very large, a very strong consensus that has to be changed. So it won't be a justiciable constitution. So I don't think we're moving to something different. There are some very few voices that would like to abolish the Constitutional Court and perhaps give justiciable powers to the Chilean Supreme Court. That has become a much more, let's say, a responsive court to social demands than the Constitutional Court. But some way or the other, it would be a justiciable court, but it would be also, there's hope that will be more differential, a more differential court. I think that there is a demand for more democracy and less adjudication.
Then the issue is going to be how that court gets appointed. Who's going to be on the court?
Yeah, I think that there's been one of the few good things of the last year is that there was a body of, non-partisan group of constitutional scholars that had been working on a more, a constitutional court that has less powers and a more diverse integration and something that's less, but you know how these things go. Basically, the current constitutional code is deeply identified with Pinochet's constitution. So I think that any new court that's appointed in a process that's more transparent, that has less, that gives less power to the president, would be way more acceptable.
Javier, I'm mindful that we want to leave time for questions, so I just wanted to ask one question we haven't really touched on, you raised, and I think it's important to talk about the very repressive response that the government has taken against the protesters and the human rights violations that have taken place, and now the InterAmerican Commission is looking into the situation in Chile, and there's calls for a truth commission about what it's taking place. And could you comment a bit on that and how you evaluate the state's response and what should be done moving forward?
The human rights, there's not only the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, but the High Commission of Human Rights of the UN, which happens to be led by former President Michelle Bachelet, is about to issue a report in the next couple of weeks. So there's a lot of expectation to see that report. Having said that, there's already a very clear indications by just seeing videos and just seeing reports by the National Commission on Human Rights that the police was both incompetent to stop riots and at the same time used an incredible amount of disproportionate force to attack peaceful demonstrators. There's a couple of reports by doctors that claims that the number of people who lost the sight or lost an eye due to this, I don't know the name in English of these bullets that are supposed to be rubber bullets, but they're very, very dangerous anyway. They're not I don't know again the name of those bullets that are not, regular bullets, but the damage they have done. Some doctor reported that was more people lost eyesight in Chile these 4 weeks than the last Intifada, and in the whole movement in France over a full year. So there has been an incredible, people are trying to understand, they're students of the police, of the Chilean police, who claim that the level of inexperience might have to do with the lack of training. They're even asking for foreign assistance of European police who are very used to demonstrations but know how to do it. We're going to have to wait, I think, to the report by the UN's High Commissioners on Human Rights to know more about this, and the InterAmerican Human Rights Commission report. But it's been really distressing to see both the violation of human rights on the one hand, coupled with huge incompetence. I cannot even start to say how the Argentinian diplomats, I mentioned the Argentinian embassy because it's one block from from the square the square that is the preferred place where demonstrators go. So the Argentinian reports were really worrisome just a week ago. The fact that Piñera did not call for a new state of emergency and instead announced the constituent process and a new social agenda, it speaks well of the president at that particular moment, because the right wing was pressuring to bring the military to the streets again. So, and I think that danger is now decreasing as days go on. But truth commissions are one possibility. Nothing is out of the table at this point.
Okay. Maybe as a last thought, and then we'll open it up to questions, could you say, what are your greatest fears and your greatest hopes for the convention, the Constitutional Convention, and the social and political process over the next 2 years?
Your question is excellent because it speaks to an opinion poll that we had an opportunity to read very recently. In the worst of the violence, which was last Tuesday, a week ago, there were two fears that most of the people had. One fear, typically from people over 45 years of age, was the fact that this could, that the violence could really got out of hand, and that there would be a military aggression, even a military coup of sorts, the way today are, not as obvious as in the 70s and 80s, but a kind of not that soft military coup. But on the other hand, the other fear that people had was that nothing will change. There was a lot of hope, and they're partially true, that it will be a true change on the social and economic model, the extreme neoliberal model that we have in Chile. My fear now will be that because the social unrest, the violent social unrest continues, a an extreme right-wing group will emerge. Something like Bolsonaro in Brazil. I mean, people in the social circles that I move are, all of them are very excited and hopeful with the new constitution being something that could channelize discontent and open new possibilities for Chile. But there are concerns that something like what happened in Brazil, in Bolsonaro, could happen again. I think that this is not likely at the moment. The most visible candidate for being Bolsonaro is José Antonio Cast. He's a very peculiar former senator, former congressman. But it doesn't yet have the kind of appeal that Bolsonaro had for the right wing. On the other hand, I think that if the Communist Party and the portion of the Frente Amplio who did not, which signed the agreement, goes on board, and I think the Communist Party will do so, because I think now there are signs that they are understanding that this agreement is not a bad agreement if you want to change in Chile. I think that there is a hope that the referendum in April will be a very decisive referendum that approves a new constitution, and I hope that approves a full constituent assembly. It has the name of Constitutional Convention. That's a very pragmatic name decision that was made. But I really think that this could start re-enchanting the people with the Chilean state, because there's a lot of distrust in the social fabric of society. And the system is really disconnected with, and it's very much distrusted by a bulk of the Chilean population. So I think this is going to be a start of a very slow process of trying to reconstruct the social tissue, so to speak.
So why don't we open it up to questions now? There's a lot of people here that I think have a lot to say. Yeah.
I have been watching in news.
You have to speak. Can you hear, Javier? Yeah.
Okay. I have been watching in news that Chilean population has been doing meetings, has cabildos, and I would like to know if you think that it's possible that through these mechanisms the Chilean population could to begin a constitution assembly. I don't know what he thinks about this.
Did you understand the question, Javier?
I got it. Basically, these cabildos or these social gatherings are all over the place, and I think they're the most constructive thing that can come out of these very intense weeks we have had. My impression, though, is that when the election for the constituent members of these constituent organs come, I fear that there might be disappointment that many candidates that are independent and that come from the social movements will not get elected to the constituent body. So I hope that the technical committee that's working allows for very, very easy ways for social movements to present candidates. Now they're regulated under the ban of being independent candidates. But we really need to figure out how to make sure that people who are connected to social movements get into the constituent assembly. That's not easy because you have an electoral system that's proportional, but it's very hard in only a year. That's in October of 2020 is when the members of the constituent body will be elected. We have less than a year to figure out how people who are coming from social movements get into the constituent body.
To me, there seems to be like a disconnect between the problem and the solution. And what I mean by this is, on the one hand, you have like a very 21st century type of protest that's leaderless, it's personalized, it has all kinds of demands. But then you have a very classic solution, which is, well, let's have a constitutional agreement, which the parties very quickly agree to, because in Chile, there isn't that much political polarization among parties. And so I wonder how this very classic solution to a confrontation between elites can really solve this issue, which seems to be more diffuse and less clear.
Excellent way of framing the issue. I think, political parties of the right wing, in a funny way, they relate to their constituency in a very classic way, and they're very well organized, and they already the UDI party started a campaign to vote no for the new constitution. And they will be a formidable adversary. So in a way, it's even more complicated. We have in the center left a very 21st century way of disconnect between a leaderless movement and the political party system. But in the right, the people are following these parties. It's fascinating that aspect to it. So when, in a way, this agreement was the best that could be done in, I think, the right wing really was, I wouldn't use the word generous. I think they felt that they really needed to be open and allow the people to express themselves in a referendum, to decide what system, what mechanism to use, and to have the option. They didn't want the first plebiscite, the first referendum. They just wanted that Congress will draft a new constitution and present that to the people, a very old-fashioned way of. But on the other hand, in Chile, we are very mindful that, let's say, the Iceland, a very participatory constituent process, ended up with no new constitution. And in Iceland, that's not such a big problem, because they don't have, as the default constitution, Pinochet's constitution. So we have this is an agreement that we can live with all the constraints that you rightly point out.
Yes.
So we know about U.S. support for the Pinochet coup and regime, and my question is, what has been U.S. support in more recent years? Are they involved at all with the Pinochet regime, and what kind of support might we see as this process keeps going? Are they supporting the military and the police right now? And is it likely that there will be economic and propagandist support for the right as this process keeps going? What do you know about that?
Well, the world has changed so much when it comes to international relations for Chile. The most active government in Chilean politics over the last 6 months has been the Chinese government. Basically, the US government has been, I would say, very absent from the debate and from this crisis. I mean, Donald Trump issued a couple of statements saying that he will come to the APEC meeting that in the end it did not take place here because of the demonstrations and the riots and the whole change of the political and social situation. But really, the Chinese government is today more relevant for Chilean foreign policy than the US. Chile's exports are 40% directed to China. And the Chinese ambassador has been incredibly active in Chilean politics, like saying, but not meddling with this issue. They are really, looking at this. They have been silent ever since October 18th. But before that, they were very active, basically selling the notion that the Chinese government is very respectful of human rights and they have one of the best democracies on earth. And even attacking the US democracy is obsolete on the press. And the silence of the US ambassador for me was very striking. And basically, I would say, my impression is that the US is really looking at this from a distance and not really paying a lot of attention.
Javier, greetings. Let me ask you this question. Chile is going through this crisis as well. How do you see the future in terms of the other Latin American countries that they are facing sort of similar issues like Bolivia as we speak right now? So how do you see Chile coming back as a leader as before, and what is happening with the other Latin American countries from Mexico down south?
The Chilean society and elites are now so shocked by what happened here that they feel in no position to give any sort of leadership or advice to no one. And I think that's very welcome. The notion that Chile was sort of a model, I mean, 2 days before this, Piñera stated that Chile was an oasis in Latin America of stability and growth, and I think that Chile is going to be, for a long time now, trying to be humble and trying to look at other experiences. I've been a long fan of Uruguay as the most functional country in Latin America, but nobody wants to pay attention because they say it's small. I think that's a very simplistic way of, dismissing a very interesting social, economic, and political process, such as Uruguay's. But I think that what I can say because of the way colleagues in the region have reacted, they have all been very, very shocked by what happened. Some are very hopeful, but the fact remains that this is something that happened. This social, explosion happened in a country that had one of the least poverty rates on the region, with a very high growth in the last 3 decades, a country that almost tripled its GDP per capita, is perhaps one of the richest countries in per capita terms of the region. So I think that there's a lot of going back to trying to think what happened here. It's very, very interesting. I think that it's a very bad news for neoliberalism. People didn't know that Chile has one of the most extreme versions of neoliberal model economic policy making on earth. So I think that in that sense is good news for those of us who think that neoliberal policy making is really crazy. They're way more humane versions of capitalism than the one that Chile has, because you have not stopped having it's in the verge of changing.
So I think we have time for one last question. Yeah.
So I have to ask a sociology question, because there have been a lot of social movements. When you mentioned the 21st century horizontal mobilization, the anti-government protests have been organized very spontaneously, very horizontally. It also makes them it lacks resilience as a movement. And when you said you hoped it's not like Brazil, you should really pay attention to what happened with Bolsonaro's election, the way trolls and fake messages shifted the vote in Brazil to Bolsonaro in the last 3 months was unbelievable. And no one knows who funded those trolls. There's a lot of data now that says that there were there were Israeli PSYOP companies involved in sending fake messages, but nobody knows who was paying them. And it's actually something that people should be really concerned about going into the referenda. If the right is supporting no, and the left doesn't deal with the social media stuff, it's really risky.
I completely agree. Luckily, the president of Renovación Nacional, the most moderate right-wing party, is firmly with the notion that Chile needs a new constitution. So it's not always mostly the UDI party, the most Pinochet minded party. But you're right. Social media has been extremely important to mobilize the people in these last 4 weeks. And I think that I'm very grateful that many academics who are working for a new constitution are going into social media and the TV. I mean, there was this notion that academics should not go into, mainstream TV and there's a lot of demand for them to go to explain what is the constitution, why a reform is different from how this body work. And I think that demand for civic education, in a way, which was really not at the center of the educational system in Chile, might be something that can help to balance those trolls and all these, new
news.
facts of political life that we have to deal with. I think that we are going to end up with something like